How does it feel?
Groovy.
So, before I start this review, hands up, I am a huge Evil Dead fan, and Evil Dead 2 is actually my favourite film of all time, so maybe somewhat biased in this review, but nonetheless I have a few things to say about it. So we are of course talking about Ash versus the Evil Dead, the continuation of the original Evil Dead franchise, not the more recent kind of remake that was had. This has nothing to do with that movie. This is instead focusing on the original character Ash, played by Bruce Campbell, who is basically in the kind of the original 3 movies. Although I have to say, the timeline of this one is a little wonky to me because it does seem to kind of ignore Evil Dead 3, aka Army of Darkness. It doesn't seem to have happened because there's a few flashbacks here and they completely don't mention it, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe we'll find out as the kind of series progresses. Nonetheless, so it really focuses 30 years after Ash's last encounter with the Evil Dead, whenever that may be. And he unwittingly summons the forces of evil again when he's high one night with some woman. And of course, he is reluctantly pulled back into this world of the supernatural, except this time we actually have a few kind of peripheral characters that seem to kind of be pulled along with him and may end up being some kind of partner to him and help him in his kind of quest to rid the world of the Deadites. So let's talk about the positives and negatives of Ash versus the Evil Dead. I'm not going to go too much into the plot, although I'm going to kind of touch on it again because I think it's pertinent to this review. So the positives with this film. So this one obviously is... This actual episode is directed by Sam Raimi, so it is very reminiscent and kind of definitely has that feel of the original Evil Dead franchise. So if you're kind of hankering for that kind of kinetic feel that the original kind of films had, this definitely has it. So if you haven't watched the original films, I think you may possibly be put off by some of Bruce Campbell's kind of cheesiness and kind of knowing winks at the camera, but if you are a fan, it's all there again for you basically. And I have to say, this is a fun episode. Lots actually happens in it. There's quite a few Deadites, different Deadites that pop up, and the makeup, and they use quite a lot of practical effects here. All look fantastic. It has that fantastic kinetic feel. It's fun, it's gory, it's very, very violent, and definitely captures that Evil Dead feel. So, there are the positives for you. The negatives, and I do have a couple. So, I think this homages the original films a little bit too much. It does seem there are certain scenes in this film that say, remember this scene from the original films? Here it is again in a slightly different context. And it does that a few times. It's kind of a little bit like, I think sometimes what the problem is with the Phantom Menace. It's like, oh, you remember this kind of character, or you remember this kind of thing. Let's kind of do it again in a different way. And some of the classic scenes that you remember, like the smashing of the plates and the face and things like that, are done in slightly different ways. I wish they maybe had, you maybe had one kind of reference thing like that, but it's to me it was a little bit too much. There's a little bit too many homages to the original kind of series to me. The second thing I thought was a little bit off for me was some of the CGI here. So there are certain scenes where they use CGI, particularly there's a scene involving a little doll that comes alive, and it is terrible CGI, really, really bad CGI. Now, I'll prefix this by saying, if you look back to the original Evil Dead films, they were made for a shoestring budget, especially the first one. So kind of wonky effects basically are part and parcel with the original Evil Dead franchise. So you can kind of say, well, they're kind of keeping in tradition with that. But I've got to say, on the flip side of that, the practical effects here look very, very good. So I don't think it's a knowing nod, if that makes sense. So I think if it was meant to be this kind of throwback to the kind of the early 80s and have these kind of cheesy effects, they wouldn't, the practical effects would kind of mirror that as well, but they don't. So I just think some of the CGI here, and most of the effects are practical, but there are certainly a few CGI effects that I felt were extremely poor. The little doll scene is the perfect example of that. And to be honest with you, that's kind of my only real gripes with this sort of TV show. I think they maybe made Ash a little bit too, maybe a little bit too far with his character. I don't really remember him ever being quite like this in the original franchise, as in a kind of pot-smoking, super womanizing. Well, I guess he was in the Evil Dead in the Army of Darkness, but I don't know. They maybe kind of just turned him up a little bit, turned the kind of the ratchet up a little bit. And I suppose the only other thing I worry about, maybe, it's only the first episode, but if you ever watched the Blade TV series, he was almost a co-star in his own TV show. And this does focus a lot of time on other characters. There's kind of two other kind of work colleagues that end up kind of fighting by his side, and a police detective as well, who I'm assuming is going to kind of come into the fold, and quite a lot of time is spent with them. So I'm hoping the focus will remain on Ash, because he really is the kind of the face of Evil Dead, and him not be a co-star really in his own kind of TV series. I mean, that's not necessarily a criticism of this episode, because they do have to establish the characters, but I just get it's more of a hope for me. I'm hoping it doesn't kind of do that, but we'll see. But like I said, this is a really enjoyable pilot. If you're a fan of the Evil Dead films, you will like this. I absolutely guarantee it. If you've never seen the original films, you may think it's kind of cheesy. You may not kind of understand some of the why they're doing certain things and why it's a little bit goofy in a certain manner. Obviously, not particularly realistic. Some of the kind of stunts and things like that. You're thinking, man, I don't know if I kind of like this. If you're used to the kind of the more realistic approach that the kind of the remake had, you may find this a little bit too goofy for your taste. But it's just watching it, everyone. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm certainly going to be watching this series on a regular basis. I'm going to give this 7.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.